Um, if there, I've said this many times before, and normally I don't like to repeat myself, but given what's going on right now with energy, very very powerful energy that's coming in here, I call it cleansing energy. Um, is I try and keep it as simple as I possibly can, like I'm going back to being 4 years of age, like my dad used to say. You haven't even been to school yet. Where did you learn all this? Okay. Because when you're running a hyperdrive, which means I'm a monopole, okay, so that's a forever being, okay. So the last thing that I ever want to do by anything that I communicate, doesn't matter what I communicate, and particularly as I mentioned before, when it comes to English, and I've mentioned this also before, it's impossible. It is impossible. Usually, when we think of everything, when you think of eternal love, which means infinite possibilities, because infinite love, which is infinite light, which is infinite creative energy, is always going to seek the pathway of least electrical density to experience something different than what it experienced before. Now, you may not have ever tested yourself on this. I have, just by means of observation, being the observer and the experiencer, and realizing that I don't do anything. When you think of the opening and closing of a circuit, how fast it changes, okay, that I don't do anything the same way twice. There are no repeating patterns, zero. And that is one of the gifts of having an eternal blessing by being willing, if you will, to serve forever. Okay? Because this is where we get into free will. This is where we get into free consent. Right? They're really, when you're at zero, which means you're experiencing with your soul and your spirit the purest of light, which is the purest of love that goes on forever. So you know it began with what love is, and you're experiencing what love is, which is what we are. Then we know that it is our free will, right? Because love is what grants the permission, which means it's just one law. You are what love is, so you are the law. So that allows me to communicate whatever I want to communicate. But I have to be very careful on what I communicate, when I communicate, and who I'm communicating it to, what it is I communicate in energy. Because the last thing that we want to do as eternal beings is communicate something, being so hypersensitive, right? To not lower your frequency one lost fractal. No, 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 we don't want you to lose one fractal because that's why we're here. In other words, if I'm experiencing the purity in you, which means zero resistance, if I'm experiencing that your heart and soul is experiencing zero, there's no resistance. You're experiencing eternity, just like I'm experiencing eternity. Then I will experience what you're experiencing, which is eternity. Then I'm experiencing being eternity. Wow, you're zero, I'm zero. And that's a measurement of speed. You're running at the same speed. And I mentioned that in a video a while back when the girl says, what do I got to do to get your attention? You got to be vibrating as fast as I am, okay? Because you move so fast, because you realize as lines of communication are being cut, because you're experiencing the resistance in them. You want to cut those lines of communication, right? Which is the language of DNA, which is represented by the radio antenna that they are, which means that their DNA antenna, the language of DNA of what's being held in memory, can be measured by us as eternal beings. Any resistance that is held in memory, that is preventing every single circuit that represents all the magnetic circuits that are within your physical domain as a multidimensional being. If there is any resistance that we experience in us, is the resistance we're experiencing in you. So I'm experiencing the resistance in your genetics as a result of mutations, or somewhere along the way, you're holding something in memory as a result of a rule-based function that is based on QI, cybernetic infrastructure, which means you're plugged into a network that is using your energy as the means to keep it running. And that's why I'm experiencing the resistance in you, which is the resistance in the QI. So now we're actually measuring the torque speed differential between what you're running on and what I'm running on. I'm running on eternity. You're running through a QI, which means the torque speed difference between what I experience and you experience is not going to be at the same speed of communication. Lines of communication. Lines. Spirals. Lines of communication, right? Vertical and horizontal. The cross, the center point of a cross, center point of a spear. Now we're back to balance. Okay. This is where sometimes I have fun with being massless. Less mass, greater speed, right? No mass, matter, no matter. Put some light on the subject. Put some light on the matter. Put some light on the subject matter. Put some light on the dark matter. Being the purest of light, which is the purest of fire, which is the purest of consciousness, which is the purest of the soul, because the spirit of fire is cleansing the water, your water worlds, right? I mean, even if I had to measure my own journey by virtue of all the water that I have consumed over the course of my life, so much wasn't what we call mature, the maturity of the water, the spring water, or even the maturity of trees. I put a post up a long time ago about why they cut down trees. You know, they're energy harvesters. They're corporate minds. A corporate mind, particularly if you're in a clone version like a simulator, to them it doesn't matter what they destroy because they don't have any love in their heart to protect everything that love creates out of the energy that's represented by what they are, being one. In other words, being one, they experience being one law. They experience being one law, then they're experiencing the purity of the love in their own heart. Thus, when you're in their presence, you're experiencing the love in their heart. We experience in our heart. Hey, now we're both loving the music. Now we're running the same vibration. Wow, love that music, baby. Yeah, that's spirit in form. Yeah. We're dancing with all the music, right? So for a lot of folks, it's not that technology in and of itself, is evil, okay? Because we all use technologies to win, and this is biotech, right? But like I did in one video, do I implicitly trust the goddess who assembled this using her consciousness and her math and creative abilities for me to jump into something using my energy, which is my soul and my spirit, to be able to use this as a manner in which to communicate and perform a job while I'm here and have a blast while I'm doing it? A blast furnace? Yeah. Because everything that is perceived based on the vibration that you are is the energy that you are, that is the exchange rate speed, which is the exchange rate between light and electrons. Photons kicking out electrons. So if you're running a monopole, that means that everything that is in nature is experiencing what we are, which is what love is. It goes on forever, gifting them all energy. So now all the elementals that are represented by all the elementals, right, that exists within all the energy is experiencing what we are, which is what love is. Now they remember the source from which it all began. Who do you think the elementals would rather be with? Somebody using technology to weaponize elements? Or be with the one, which means now experiencing what love is, that gifts that energy forever. The elements know who's who and who they'd rather be with, right? Yeah. It's no different than when you're giving love to a dog, right? Last night when I came home, a Koa, which is a beautiful pointer dog, just comes running at me, just couldn't get off me, okay? In other words, she was glad to meet your energy. What she remembers, what's held in her memory, is the energy that is represented by what you are in energy. So she remembers the love that I am, that she's experiencing in her. That means that she's holding that vibrational frequency. That vibration is held in her memory. So now what happens is when she sees me come back, she remembers that energy, because that energy that is represented by that signal communication is held within her memory. Now she remembers. So when she sees me, now she remembers what I am in energy. Now she wants to be around that energy. That means we will attract all the elementals. The elementals will want to be with us because now they remember the one. That means now all the elementals are dancing in spirit with all the other living spirits that are represented by all the living light. which is living intelligence, which is living energy, which is living spirit with a soul. Right? So one of the things, that when so at the end of the day, essentially what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that instead of measuring what people say by the word and number arrangements of the English language, what I have the ability to naturally measure, notice the word naturally, measure, is I've been measuring what we call resistance ever since I was 4 years old. I'm measuring the resistance in the DNA operating system by virtue of that particular being, no matter who they are, and their ability to remember who they actually are. In other words, their original identity, because of their ability to memory wipe and reprogram. Right? So that's why with me, I remember one time when Patty Bessard had mentioned, not just because I understand how programming memory work, because otherwise I wouldn't have known and experienced what I experienced when I was at 4 years of age by being able to translate the language through what I'm experiencing here in language codes, right? Gene swarming, right? Or if you will, knowing or acknowledging that I'm in a fallen spiritual system. So when you're in a fallen spiritual system, you're able to measure the difference in the consciousness planetary field of software, the difference between what you know that we are and the energy that has fallen, which means I'm not experiencing what love is. Everywhere I go, through all the beings that are now in my mirror. But that's what we experience. So now you're making a measurement of resistance, which is the resistance in the entire planet, across all densities and all dimensions. Because when you're an eternal being, we don't perceive the universe in terms of density or dimension. It's perceived as being eternity, which means I'm an eternal love vibration giver of energy. Right? So in other words, it's just energy. What are you experiencing in energy? So in other words, the geometric math automatically sort of translates itself that way as by the way of the law of least effort. So in other words, whatever is the genius that is built into the energy, which means we don't have to think about the math or the geometry. It just happens automatically. It's built in. That means that the balance, or the way that the sonic tones that are represented by being a spiritual musician, right? It means that you have reached a state of mastery, if you want to think of it as mastery, okay? It means that you are automatically, by virtue of simply being what it is that you are in energy as an eternal being, means that anything that is less than what that is going to automatically be burned off, so that the original frequencies that represent what we are as the one automatically come into play. Automatically come into play. Right? Record one, play two. So that means that when we come in as a monopole, ground the monopole like a rod, a staff, like you see in Lord of the Rings when that wizard had that staff, right? Mine is usually in a hiking stick because I love to hike steep trails to go up to glaciers, stuff like that, right? Climbing the highest mountain. Let's get a view, baby. Let's survey the landscape, how beautiful it is, of everything that is here to experience, because the amount of love that we experience through us, which is eternal, because it's eternal unconditional love that we're experiencing in our heart, that we're bringing in wherever we go. So you can understand the importance and the value of that when a monopole comes into a fallen spiritual system. That's called reintegration or integration, a polarity integrator, to bring everything back into one, which means heal an entire planet. Everything that is here that has ever suffered any trauma that is held in memory as a result of energy wars, which are electrical wars, which are war between seeded races. So when you're an eternal being and you know that, that means that you're the first. It didn't come before us. Nothing comes before eternity. Okay? Eternity came first. So you already know by virtue of being what that is, how much fire is represented by that. And that's why it's impossible for me to communicate what I know that I'm connected with, or what is represented by the amount of energy that is represented by what I am in soul and spirit. It's impossible to communicate that much energy using this phone or using a keypad. And that's why I used to think, even when I was in college, for example, and I used to be able to manipulate energy, because it's really what you're doing on a keypad, right? And keypads that are basically, in my mind, don't give you the full extent of bigger keyboards, right? To communicate, which means that I always felt it was what we call time intensive, because it's all based on time, which means it's all based on simulating. So like when I was in school, I realized that, oh, wow, I have a schedule here. You know what a schedule is? Now we're back into tables. Now we're back into the exchange rate of speed between quantum intelligence and our intelligence, which is eternal intelligence, which is eternal creative power. Means that there's no way that I could ever use any keyboard to be able to compress and then communicate that much energy that fast. Now we're back into speed. Now we're back into drives. There is no way that I could ever communicate that much purity of that much light that is represented by what's possible that I could communicate, okay, based on the rule-based functions of quantum intelligence, to thus transfer that much energy using a keypad. You think? Okay, I think as Patty once said, your head would explode. Well, I can tell you a lot more than my head would explode. The inside of this planet would explode. Right? There wouldn't be anything left from the inside out, which means you need more space in order to sound compress and break through how much energy is represented by all creation. So now you get into the idea of rewriting, reinventing yourself, recreating yourself, right? Hey, that experience is gone. Now you want to experience the next one. Now you want to experience the next one, experience the next one, on and on and on. But the speed at which those events are actually taking place on a multidimensional and multi-density way in which we're connected to all the others is actually measured in resistance, by the resistance that's being experienced by all the others that are alive and living in the all creation, that have the ability to communicate with all of us through the light. So the light is natural, creative intelligence communication. So light is energy. So energy is communicating with us. Light energy communicates through me, and I communicate it through others. So we're back to wherever the light is, we are. So I share what I become aware of with others. So now they now become aware of what I'm experiencing, that I'm sharing with others. And then as soon as I end this, then all of a sudden I'm experiencing something totally different.